Hi, welcome back to Ed Talks, the show where I spend 15 minutes researching a topic I know nothing about and then explain it back to you. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Crusades, a holy war, a war fought for the Holy Land, which many Muslims and Christians believe hold a high spiritual and holy place, hence the name Holy Land. The Crusades were a bloody war where probably 2 million people died fighting for land. The first crusade was launched in the year 1093. Crusades lasted until about 1291, so it lasted about 200 years is how long the war lasted. Now, there were some times of peace in between those 200 years. You'd have stints, 20, 30 years with them. There was no war where the Muslims and Christians coexisted and lived peacefully with each other. But most of that 200 years, there was many different battles that were waged all across the Middle East. The first starting in 1093 when Pope Urban II raised an army to take back Jerusalem from the Muslims who had captured it a few hundred years earlier, from the Brezotanic or some other kind of Christian group. Who cares? Now, with the first Crusades being started, it ignited many wars across the land, where many millions of people died, both rich and poor, soldiers and civilians. Now, to build up this army, Pope Urban II had promised land, money, and forgiveness for sin to poor Christians around the country to get soldiers. The first Crusades lasted about 15 years, ending in the early 11th century. Ending in the early 12th century, I think, something like that, like 1110 or something like that. Who cares about the dates? They're not important. Now, the First Crusades ended successfully with the recapture of the Holy Land. Pope Urban II's armies managed to take back Jerusalem from the Muslims. That didn't end there. The Muslims had responses. They attacked again various settlements, various cities, eventually taking back Jerusalem a few decades later. I think it was about 3 decades later, so around 1130. At this point, Pope Urban II had already passed on, and a new pope was appointed. Who knows his name? It doesn't matter. This new pope built up another army very similar to the first one to try to take back Jerusalem. This army wasn't quite as successful. The Second Crusades didn't go quite as well as the first. There was more casualties, and this time it cost more. They needed a bigger army to try to take back Jerusalem because the Muslims had good fortifications and good defenses in the city this time. The Second Crusades lasting about 40 years, 30 years, something like that. They kind of ran into the second and third kind of ran into each other. That's not important. So the armies marching on Jerusalem to try to take it back didn't succeed. They were pushed back, I think. And if they weren't, they eventually take it again anyways. It's back and forth. It's like a game of tug of war with Christians and Muslims in Jerusalem up until, I guess recently. So, the Second Crusades, when they ended, the Pope started to rebuild his army again after his first army was defeated. This time he offered even more. He offered indulgences, which in those times it meant that you were forgiven for your sins by the Pope, which made it easier for you to get into heaven or whatever religious place you believed in at the time. All in total, there were 8 crusades, ranging from the years 1093 to 1291. Those are 2 important dates. Everything else in the middle kind of just doesn't matter. It's just dates. Dates aren't important. Start and finish. Those are the 2 you need to know. So the Second Crusade's not quite successful, right? Now, we move on to the Third Crusades with the same Pope that had the Second Crusades. This time his army was even larger and he managed to take back the city. In doing so, the Muslims had to retreat, but it wasn't as devastating as it was for the Christians during the Second Crusade. But this time they managed to live in peace for 30 years or so. They were able to coexist and live in peace without any issues for quite a while in comparison to the years before. Eventually, the Muslims attacked again to take back the city once again, which brought on the Fourth Crusades. A lot of people argue that the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Crusades are kind of just rolled into one. There's no real definitive start or end to them. So it's kind of just like one long thing, but there was like little mini breaks in the battles, which helps kind of split up the Crusade 4, 5, and 6, eventually leading into 7 and 8, with 9 being on the end, but 9 is not really a crusade. It's more of a, this is kind of what happened at the end. It's kind of not really important, though. So 4, 5, and 6, though, this was launched by a different pope, Pope Innocent III, I believe his name was, had amassed his armies, very similar to Pope Urban II, who launched the First Crusades, remember, in 1093. His armies this time were even more massive than before, and he took the city back without an issue, which the Muslim armies didn't like. So they attacked again and took the city back again. Just a big game of tug of war, back and forth with these people. They won't give up. Now, with taking the city back again, the Muslims were in the strong position again. So, yet again, the Seventh Crusade was launched and the city was recaptured, and then, the Christians had it and the Muslims took it back again from them, and that kind of ended it all. Around the Eighth Crusades, around 1291, is when most people agree that the Crusades ended. So, with that, though, there were still many wars lasting, 50, 60 years after the last Crusade ended, before the Holy Wars, if you call them, that's what they actually are. It's not if you call them, that's what they are called. They're called Holy Wars. Finally ended with the Jewish people being back in control of Jerusalem and the Holy Land not being a Christian state. There were Crusader states during that time that were Christian occupied, all around the Middle East, all around the Holy Land. They controlled the land, so they controlled the people and the money around there. They had crops and stuff you use to help reinforce the soldiers trying to take the city. Those all started falling. When those fell is when the Crusades finally ended. When the last Crusader state is what they were called, fell around the year 1291, 1295-ish, a little bit after the Crusades technically, historically ended. The last Crusader state finally fell, meaning that the Christian armies were no longer able to easily supply their troops with equipment, food, and the resources they needed to continue to wage the war to recapture the Holy Land. So from there, you get warring Christians now. A certain Christian sect had marched on Constantinople to try to take that from a different branch of Christianity that is considered like a lesser crusade that happened during the time, not so much to do with the Holy Land, but more so to do with taking a lesser holy site, if you will. That's the gist of what the Crusades were. There's a little more. There's some more dates in there, but again, the in between really isn't that important because the war kind of just went on for the entire time from 1093 to 1291. I mean, there's war constantly, and I believe I already said this, but about 2 million people died. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of people to die during a war for some land. I mean, that's a lot. Big number. 2 million is a big number. But that's about all there is to go over on the Crusades, at least in this short informational video. With that, we'll bring it to an end, and I hope you have a great day, and thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Ed Talks. If you like this episode, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to catch more content like this. Check us out on social media at Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Leave a comment below if you'd like a certain subject covered, and check out our new show, Storytime, here. Thank you, and have a great day.